Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Movie Minds podcast. I am Joe, and this is Brad. Say hi, Brad.
Hello, everyone.
And tonight we are going to be talking about a movie that I kind of want to talk about a year or so ago, but better late than never. And actually, joining us tonight is Nate. Say hello, Nate.
Hello, Nate.
Thank you. Someone had to do it. Yep, Nate the Great is here to talk with us about The Count of Monte Cristo, which is honestly a movie that I liked quite a bit growing up. And it's kind of a little bit of backstory for that, but I'll save it. And the reason Nate's here is because I found out briefly discussing it that you said you really liked this one growing up watching. It was one of your favorites. And I know that you're currently reading the novel that the film is based on by Alexander Dumas. So I'm really curious to hear your insights on it since you're kind of new to this. So I'm going to just kind of put it on you and then we'll jump in.
Sure, thanks. Thanks for having me on the show too. Yeah, like Joe said, he's was talking about different movies he wanted to talk about, and he mentioned The Count of Monte Cristo. And Joe and I worked together for what, 2 years
Mm-hmm.
previously at the same high school. So we would chat, various pop culture over that time. But when you mentioned The Count of Monte Cristo, it was like a flash from the past for me because when I was like a junior in high school, I bought a PlayStation 2, top of the line stuff back then, and I would always acquire DVDs, right? And I remember going to see The Count of Monte Cristo when it came out, and I had the DVD, and I watched that thing like dozens of times, because we didn't have streaming services where we could just go pick things, and my selection was very limited. So this was a movie that I just kind of came back to a lot as I was growing up. And I didn't really know why, other than it was a great movie. And when you said you wanted to talk about it on here, I watched it again. I had actually recently watched it again with my kids,
Mm.
and we had a really fun time. They were really into it. So, I mean, the first time I ever even heard of the Count of Monte Cristo was in The Shawshank Redemption, when
Oh.
Andy Dufresne's in there organizing library books, and the one guy, kind of a meathead, picks it up and he's like, "The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumbass."
Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. Dumbass.
Dumas.
And I was always laughed at that, because I had heard of it, like it's a classic, but it wasn't until I saw the movie that I had a clue what the plot really was about. And like you said, I am now reading the novel. It's kind of a beast. It's a big book. It was originally published as a serial, which I did not know until I started reading it. So I can't really comment on the novel too much other than to say it's actually pretty easy to read, even though it's big, because it was
Hmm.
serialized. So you can kind of go through chapter by chapter and they don't take very long. But as far as I've gotten anyway, the movie seems to hold pretty accurate to a lot of the events, but obviously for some cinematic reasons they have to abridge it, right? And that's one of the things I think that this movie does incredibly well is it is a complex story. So if you're unfamiliar with the story, basically the main character's name is Edmond Dantes, and he's a young sailor. He's like a middle lower class kind of a guy at the time period, and this is after Napoleon Bonaparte's exile to the island of Elba. All right. So there's political tensions in France at this time to the people loyal to the emperor and people who are not, right? So he's this young sailor, and the story opens up with him um, on a he's returning home from whatever journey he was on, whatever merchant stuff he was doing. And the captain of the boat takes sick, and they stop at Elba to try to find him help. And he meets Napoleon Bonaparte here. And while they're there, the captain dies, but Napoleon's impressed with him and his commitment to his um, mission and his captain. And Napoleon pulls him aside privately and says, "Hey, I have a letter that I'd like you to deliver to an old friend back in France. Please do this." And Edmond, he's illiterate. He can't read, but he's an honest, good guy. And you can just see this all through and through, which we'll talk about casting and actors as we get going, I'm sure. But Jim Caviezel just nails this kind of a role of that innocent, pure, good man who's really striving to be the best, just honest and everything too. So he comes back to France. He is engaged to be married because the captain died, and he kind of took charge to solve the problem when he was sick and everything. The owner of the ship promotes Edmond to be the captain over the first mate. So there's one guy now who has it out for Edmond. Um, he's also engaged to be married, and his best friend, at least in the movie, it's his best friend, also loves this girl. So there's two guys now who have it out for Edmond Dantes. And they start to come together and conspire about how to bring this guy down. They hate him because he's good. So one thing leads to another. They charge him with treason because he stopped at the island where Napoleon was. And he is brought before the magistrate, whoever this, I forget what they call it in France, but the prosecutor, right? Like the DA in our language.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy questions him about it. And he says, "Oh, you're totally innocent. There's nothing wrong here, but you're doing it. You're kind of in a dangerous area, right?" And he asks him, "Who are you supposed to deliver this letter to?" And Edmond tells him the guy's name, and that suddenly throws a switch. And it turns out that the prosecutor, his father, is a loyalist to Napoleon, and that's who is supposed to get this letter. So he throws Edmond into jail, and they send him to the Chateau d'If, which is basically French Alcatraz. Right? They send him out there on an island prison to just be forgotten forever. Well, the story kind of splits into two different lines at that point because while Edmond is gone, his fiance is inconsolable, and Edmond's best friend steps in and woos her and marries her, and because they all think he's dead at this point. He's gone. Nobody knows what happened to him. But then while he's in prison, he's there for years. I want to say it's like 14 years or something, or maybe 11. I forget. It's a long time. And they follow his journey through being in prison. And while he's in there, another character is introduced. I forget his actual character name. It's Father something. But
Richard Harris.
Richard Harris, yeah, Dumbledore in the movie. Dumbledore
yes.
is also a prisoner, the first Dumbledore, and he is trying to escape, and he actually tunnels into Edmond's room, his cell, and realizes, oh shoot, I was digging the wrong way. Well, then he kind of recruits and they form a bond. This is where you get the mentor figure, right? And this guy is well educated. He's a former soldier who had done some horrible stuff in his past, and then just decided to abandon that life, and he got thrown into jail for it. And he's been rotting there ever since. He's an old man and he's trying to escape. So he and Edmond start working together to escape. And he says, in exchange for your help, I'll teach you. I'll teach you about philosophy and all this other stuff. That he's an educated man. And Edmond is like, "Can you teach me to read and write?" One of the best lines of the film that gets that ball really rolling. Oh, okay, yeah, I can teach you to read and write. Well, it's a montage of him learning, and he teaches him to sword fight and all this other stuff too. And he teaches him to think creatively, and eventually, how detailed do you want me to go in the summary? You want me to get?
I'm loving it. Yeah, keep going. I
right,
think
cool.
you're refreshing it for it. Yeah, this is fun.
All right. The movie came out in like 2004, so I don't care if it spoils it for you. If you don't know, pause it now and go watch it. All right. So anyway, the Richard Harris character, that's old priest, dies as they're really close to escaping, and Edmond is in like again, and it's like, how am I ever going to get out of here? And then it hits him, and when they discover the dead body, they come and they tie it up in a bag, and they leave to go get help to go carry him and throw him into the sea. Edmond replaces himself. He gets into the bag and puts the dead body in his own cell, and then he gets thrown out, and that's how he escapes. And he is hell-bent on revenge and getting back at all of those who had betrayed him. Because in the process of him learning and growing and discussing all of this, he pieces it all together. He pieces it all together why his friend betrayed him, why the guy, the magistrate burnt the letter that he received as a key moment. He burns it, which means he didn't want anybody else to know. And then he figures out that it's because of his father who served under Napoleon, and he realizes that it was this conspiracy between several people that was his undoing. And now he's planning on revenge. He's also learned from that priest the location of a buried treasure. So now he's on his track to find this treasure. He does discover this with the help of some other unsavory characters that he ends up hooking up with after he escapes some pirates and smugglers and things. And he does get this treasure, and he uses that to fuel his revenge. And little by little, he works his way back in under this new alias of the Count of Monte Cristo. This eccentric, wealthy, unknown, mysterious man who comes to the high society where all these people who betrayed him are now very established, right? And he gets close to them through their families, through their other connections and things like that. And then uses all of that to just one by one bring them to their own destruction, right? And that's basically the plot, without giving away too much more of the ending, anyway. But it's a brilliant story of this balance between vengeance and justice, and I think that's what really is compelling about it, because you're watching a good man go down a dark path, but there is some sense of justice because of how wronged he was. He was completely innocently wronged, which is kind of where I find it compelling, right? It takes a really strong man to seek justice. And I think even when he's fueled by revenge, in actuality, there is justice being pursued, and it does work to a positive end, even if he was maybe a little off base when he started. And that's kind of where I'm at. And I do have some other thoughts on different things that happen throughout the movie, but some interesting things that I was looking up just recently to kind of get started. I think that the title is really interesting. So, first, the word count. It's a corresponding word to the English earl, right? So it's like a high-ranking lord, more or less. But the word count itself comes from let me see here, Latin. Brad, maybe you know the pronunciation better. Comitem, 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 which means companion or attendant, which was the Roman term for a provincial governor. Okay. So it's somebody who is close to like the emperor, somebody who is a companion or attendant upon a great person. So the title is like an adjunct to someone greater, right? Which I find really interesting because it's the Count of Monte Cristo, which translates to the Mountain of Christ. So in that, I think there's some moral direction baked into this, right? So even while he's working on this idea of revenge, the title itself suggests a companionship to a higher moral order. So his flaws are used perhaps towards a just end. And that's kind of what I was found interesting about that title.
Huh.
Because I knew Christo meant Christ, right? So I had to kind of think about that one a little bit. But just right off the bat, that kind of reframed the way I thought about the rest of the story. Because prior to that, I think as a high school kid, and I'm rewatching this movie maybe in my early college days too, it was a swashbuckling adventure, right? Like it was a guy who gets highly skilled, highly intelligent, and then just I like playing chess, and he just outmoves his people. He's 10 steps ahead of them at every moment when he comes back. So that was really cool. But then thinking of it in that framing of like, the Count of the Mountain of Christ was like there's a moral order I think that's structured in there that is kind of interesting. So that's my initial thoughts. I'd love to hear what you guys think. But I've definitely got more to talk about with regards to the movie. So
Oh wow. Yeah. Awesome. I think honestly, so far that's probably the best summary that's ever been done on Movie Minds podcast. Very thorough, very well done. And I think I have a tendency to sometimes go on a rant, almost a little incoherently. So I like to how well organized that was. No, very very succinct. No, I never thought about the terminology of count from that specific phrase. I mean, I think about it in terms of nobility, but beyond that, yeah, thinking in relation to the actual mountain of Christ, I never thought about that specifically. I really liked what you pointed out because um, I've always kind of enjoyed the revenge narrative in movies. I find myself, I've kind of been drawn to some of them. I find that a lot of people probably are because there is a certain degree of catharsis. You kind of feel like if somebody's wronged and then they're going on their vengeful journey. But I like that you pointed something out that I guess I must have inherently liked as well about Edmond Dantes as a character. You stated about his goodness, his upright moral character, but there's almost that simplicity and naivete at the beginning, which kind of is sort of his undoing, but maybe ultimately kind of helps him transcend. I think this reminded me a little bit about how he, of course, meets Richard Harris, the priest, as he nicknames him. There's a lot of the hero's journey stuff there. I think that a lot perfectly kind of fits in with that template, so I liked that. And in regards to the revenge angle, though, I like what you said about how he kind of has this morality, and he's trying to pursue a form of justice because, and I mean, I'm not sure if this is exactly as accurate to the novel or not, but if it is fairly close, that's great. It's that you're right when he's going against revenge against the three people that wronged him. Okay, Mondego, I think Danglars, and the magistrate guy. He he says like, oh, death would be too good for them, but in a way, he's almost kind of holding back his desire to inflict physical pain and kind of take justice completely into his own hands. He almost wants them exposed for their wrongdoing and kind of put into the same manner of injustice as he was using the same system. So he's trying to right that wrong without doing the most straightforward route. I feel like most of the time it's like, oh, I'm going to get revenge. I'm going to torture you, murder you, something more straightforward. But he decides to kind of walk a higher path, still within some of that morality, even though you can tell that at many points he almost doesn't want to. And I guess we'll try to keep the ending of the film maybe mostly spoiler free, though I agree. I mean, check it out. Things happen. It's been around a while.
Yeah, and the
But
book's 200 years old.
and the book's hundreds of years old, but I'll try to keep it semi spoiler free. But I feel like there you almost kind of get that. It's kind of the classic thing. You're trying to keep your hero truly good, where he does sort of have the ultimate battle with the evil, which I find through this watch through, I found a lot of interesting things about Guy Pearce's Mondego, which I don't think I picked up on as much before when I watched it years ago. But they have that battle at the end, and so you do sort of get a little bit of that typical, okay, the good guy wins in a more traditional way, but of course it's in the situation where, okay, he was sort of a self-defense situation. But I do like that. You make a good point about that. So yes, that's something you don't typically see is somebody going for revenge, but still trying to hold back against their most violent impulses and
Yeah,
still trying to maneuver it, like you said, being a mastermind and with the chess pieces and set them up with these little plots, which are very fun.
yeah. And when you mention that now, it made me think too. That's like the earliest form of justice in human society. When you go back to like the Code of Hammurabi, he really does kind of approach it to like an eye for an eye. Like, you took this from me, so you're gonna lose this, right? I didn't die, so death would be too good for you. Maybe there's something in that as well. How do you live after you've lost something like that, right? Like, so
Mm.
Edmond had found a way, and it was driven by revenge, and that's, I think, not ideal, obviously. Yet, yet he emerges triumphant in a way that I think is satisfactory. And like you said, he does end up killing Fernand, right? But it was not like a murder. It was
No.
like a duel, which was another aspect of the film. Like, Fernand had been abusing a lot of this stuff that
Uh,
could be seen as some sort of like agreed upon social structure, whether or not dueling is moral, right? Like, but it was a kind of agreed upon thing that people did at the time,
mhm,
socially. And so it kind of comes to that kind of a conclusion rather than a brutal backstabbing murder, like shooting somebody in the back alley, right?
mhm. And that's a good point you make. I think about how he kind of uses that to his advantage, his privilege and his wealth to kind of almost abuse that idea of justice at the time among gentlemen. So there's that scene later where he is dueling with one other gentleman and he kills them because there's some infidelity going on, but clearly he reveals he doesn't feel bad about it. He doesn't really care about his actions and how they're affecting anybody, but he's such a good swordsman and he's so well trained that he used that against Edmond in the beginning. Okay, and he uses that against this guy. So he has this this affluence, this wealth, and theoretically this authority. He is the gentleman, but
Right.
clearly he's a reprehensible, really unlikable guy. Although I did like some subtle things about him, and I'm going to hold off on that because I want to hear Brad say something. But there is something about Mondego that I really appreciate as a character, as well as Edmond. I like the humanity of them both. I think is kind of grounded. But Brad, what are your thoughts? I know you said you hadn't seen this quite as fresh as we had, but hopefully you can. This is helping you bring back some of it, all this recalling and summary and stuff.
Yeah, how's my mic sound?
Sounds pretty good.
Good. I had to replug it in. Okay. Yeah. Just to pick up there, I'll play off the aspect of justice. Like Nate, you brought up justice. So this is a what happens here is this extreme injustice is perpetrated on this innocent man. He kind of becomes the pawn in this international political thing involving Napoleon and then the forces against Napoleon. And he's sent to the Chateau d'If, which I just looked up is an actual place where political prisoners were sent. So it's kind of the place where you get rid of your problems. Which you see that in other novel like The Man in the Iron Mask, getting rid of people, you're faceless there. And so Dantes does become, it's like the angel of exacting justice, this retributive justice. And I think the reason he doesn't go, because it's easy to become corrupted by that. On one hand, he's seeking revenge, and on the other hand, he has a tremendous amount of wealth that would corrupt most people and lead them down the path. Which you could see he's faced with that. Like, is he going to make the right choices at certain points and not go completely to the dark side, so to speak? And I think it's because he's schooled by this priest who's teaching him not only to sword fight, he's teaching him to read and write, he's teaching him philosophy, he's teaching him how to be a gentleman. And one thing I was thinking, Nate, while you were talking about like recapping the story, I couldn't help but notice. So the character's name is Dantes, like Dante, and so in the Divine Comedy, Dante goes down through the Inferno, up through the mountain of Purgatorio to Paradiso. And so, like in the same thing, he goes down to hell. He's in Chateau d'If. He's cast away. He's at the lowest point, and he has a guide that kind of leads him up and out to the mountain. And this is where it's like a purgatorial experience until he comes out the other side. At that point, when he emerges as the Count of Monte Cristo, he's almost godlike because he's got all this wealth. He's an ultimate sword fighter. He's controlling these smugglers and pirates. You can't touch the guy. He's several steps ahead of everybody. And so he emerges, like you said, from this innocent kind of, easily duped character who's just a pawn. And then he goes down and you have that arc again. You go, into the underworld and out. And then he's the hero on the other side. And so even just, what's that?
There's like an apotheosis.
Yeah, like the apotheosis. That's a word I was looking for there. And it's even Dante. I was just thinking about that. As far as the film itself, that's the story. And I haven't read the book. But I like the film is extremely well paced. The pacing is good. Like it just keeps moving. Doesn't lag anywhere, and yet it doesn't jump over things. Like it's very well done storytelling, moving onward. And Nate, you already said the character, the actors, like Jim Caviezel and the guy who plays Fernando, like a great job at that. And it's the pacing's there, and it's an exciting story. And like you said, Joe, like that's a story people like. This man was wronged, and there's no doubt about it. He was wronged, and not just wronged like, hey, I'm going to send you to prison. I'm going to take your woman. I'm going to befoul your name. Like his loved ones, people pass away while he's gone, and all this kind of stuff. And then he finds out that he has a son, et cetera, et cetera. So he was completely wronged. And you get that overall, the moral lesson is you are wronged. You are innocent. So when evil is done against the innocent, how do you react to that? Because again, like you said, and Joe, you said you had more to talk about the antagonist there, but he's a sociopath. I mean, he's completely selfish. He's completely hell-bent on achieving his own ends.
Yeah.
He hates his own father. He hates his state in life, and yet he just takes. And so it's satisfying because the Count of Monte Cristo is more powerful than him, more wealthy than him, more desired by women than him, and even that scene with the balloon, he comes down. It's like, I'm above you. Look at this chateau I have, and he comes down. It's like, that's awesome. And
Yeah, and he always was above him.
yeah,
Like, and Fernand makes a comment right before he betrays him and he's arrested, and he says, why are you doing this?" And he says, "Because you're the son of a clerk,
yeah,
and I'm not supposed to want to be you."
Mm-hmm.
Right. So right there is the key to his villainy, right? It's that he's unhappy with who he is, and he doesn't realize that it doesn't come from the outside. It comes from character and integrity and decision making. Like when Edmond's captain got sick, he took charge and he tried to help him, and that was not overlooked, you know. So actually, with that thought of justice early in the movie, I had a thought of this too. He comes back and he talks to the owner of the boat, and the first mate is there. What was his name?
Danglars?
Danglars, yeah.
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 So they're sitting there trying to explain what was happening while they were gone, and Danglars is saying he disobeyed my orders. He didn't follow orders. And Morel is the owner of the boat,
Mhm.
and he says, "Is this true?" And he's like, "Yeah, I did what I had to do, for my captain, for whatever, we had to do." And the owner immediately says, "I'm promoting you to captain." And the first mate is like, "This is an outrage." And he says, "You would demote me?" He said, "Oh, there's no demotion. You'll stay on as first mate under Captain Dantes." So in that scene with Morel, the owner, you see a model of true justice, I think, um, that then angers Danglars, right? Much in the same way, like it doesn't come with a title, right? And you also have not been cheated for this, but he has earned this, right? So there was a little microcosm of justice portrayed in that very scene too. But again, the villains of this are people who can't help but be wronged, it seems,
Yeah.
right?
Like Nate,
Yeah.
I would just interject there quickly. You also have the juxtaposition of like nobility by birth, and then someone who's nobility because of their virtue that they live. And I think it's a scene that's there. It's almost like when they're on Elba, Napoleon picks him. Napoleon wasn't noble by birth. No, Napoleon is like a self-made man, not always virtuous, but he had strength and he had a certain amount of character and thing. And it's like he recognized something in him that he was drawn to that instead of the person of noble birth almost. Um, so again, you that juxtaposition there of like who's born into the title, and then who acquires that, even though he's not really the Count of Monte Cristo, but the title of Count, like he comes into that in a sense by his virtuous way of living because he is already the just man.
What's interesting there too is that Napoleon was using him just as much as anybody, like he,
Mm-hmm.
or other moral or immoral ends. I don't know how you want to read that politically speaking, but at the end of the day, Napoleon took advantage of him
Yep.
for his innocence in order to deliver,
Yeah.
his letter and further his plot. So he becomes this pawn again, which is kind of a motif throughout the movie with
Mm-hmm.
the chess piece. So every time Edmond has a victory or Fernand had a victory, they would exchange this king chess piece and be king of the day or something. And then Napoleon tells him, "We are all either pawns or kings," which again, Brad, goes back to like what you said. It's almost like to carry the chess metaphor. Dantes makes it across the board and promotes to king,
Mhm.
having been the pawn all along.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wish the only thing I don't like about I wish at the ending they would have had Dantes say like checkmate,
Right.
like Steven Seagal or something. Checkmate.
Oh,
Oh my God.
now that would have made it a true masterpiece.
I'm above the law.
Everybody stands up.
And he's in the balloon. I'm above you all. Uh,
You
no,
can't do this.
I'm
You're
glad
not
you
above
pointed out
my law.
I make the law now. I wanted to point out you brought up the chess motif, and yes, he talks about being king of the moment, which I like. And the one thing I wanted to point out about Mondego, Guy Pearce does a really good job at playing like the most slimy people. He's just really good at portraying nasty guys, and I think he does an excellent job in this film too. To contrast Jim Caviezel's kind of more innocent, honest portrayal, but I liked the subtle detail with his character where he does give him the king piece right after he betrays him and says to remember better times. Now, on one hand, that's a little bit of a dig, but but at the same time, I was kind of like the way he's portraying himself in that scene, the delivery of the line, there is a little bit of a hint to sadness. Like as bad as Mondego is, there is a little bit of subtle complexity. There's some guilt. There's some teeny tiny part of him that did value their friendship at one point. So obviously, it wasn't enough. But I like that hint that even though that they could just go 100% pure evil, there's still some humanity, and there might have been some goodness there that connected these two men, which makes the betrayal hurt even more. Like, and even when when Dantes is like screaming like why all these times you can hear it, and that's because it does hurt him so deeply, and that's partially the acting. But I like the subtlety of that portrayal, and also speaking to the point about inherent goodness, and you guys were talking about nobility by birth versus by virtue, what you earn, the seeds you plant, and how you live. There's that scene early on too, which kind of foreshadows some things where Mondego's talking to Mercedes out on the beach, and she's kind of referring to, okay, well, you have been a little different. He's trying to kind of make the moves on her a little bit, saying, he can't afford to get married, rush things along. And she's like, well, I remember this one time early on when you got this pony and you were so upset because Dantes Edmond got this little whistle and he was happier with the whistle than you were with your pony, which speaks to the whole like I'm not supposed to want to be you. The wealth doesn't make him happy. He's given all this stuff, right? All these materials, all these titles, but they don't mean anything because he can't be inherently happy because he can't appreciate the small things, the simple things in life. And I love that, which might be one reason as well, in addition to the companionship of Richard Harris in the prison. That's one reason why I think that Edmond is able to survive that prison experience, because he does have that hope, and he is able to kind of hold on to those little things. So, there's the vengeance, but there's also some of that inherent goodness for appreciating the small things. It's the little things I like too early on. They set it up so well. It's a well executed script.
Yeah, very much so. I was actually thinking about the casting with that too. These are like, that is probably one of the just all-star ensembles to deliver a story like this. Like you said about Guy Pearce, he's so despicable, but yet he's sympathetic in a way. I think maybe there's an admiration for somebody who is that skilled, like that skilled of a swordsman.
Hmm.
I think that there is a nature, a part of us as humans, right? Part of human nature is to respect someone who does have an office. Like it's kind of built in, right? And maybe that's sort of what makes him sympathetic in that sense, because you see some pain in him,
Hmm.
and yet he constantly gives into that childishness, that immaturity, which is outlined perfectly in the birthday gift story, right? Like it's all about immaturity. And maybe Dantes is kind of that story from immaturity to maturity, really highlighted by like learning to read and write. It's like he's
Hmm.
learning to walk. Everything he's doing is baby steps. Um, Whereas this other guy has it all, and it's like, oh, we just want to see him. Don't do that, you know? Don't do that to your friend.
Hmm.
Oh, you know. But yeah, it's on, note on the casting, unless you have another comment.
Oh well, I do want to hear more, Nate. I actually had a question for you. I don't know how far you got in the book. Have you gotten to the training sequence stuff yet?
No, I'm just at the part. He's in the Chateau d'If now.
Okay, because I mean I love when you mentioned the montage scene, like it's like the classic great '80s montage, just a great way to get the flow of time moving, like you said with the pacing, Brad. I just was wondering, it's so cool, but it seems like some kind of cheesy martial arts thing where he's like, can I just move my hand through the dripping water? Like I was wondering if that actually was from the novel. If it's not, it's cool. I just wondered if that. I thought that was just a fun
I
little
can't
thing
say
there.
that yet. I don't know.
Yeah,
I haven't gotten that
I
far.
just wonder if
I
that's
always
from
like, yeah, I
Dumas.
always like that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
thought that was cool. But yeah, go ahead, Nate, about more casting stuff. They're great.
Well, just thinking about each of those main characters, so a couple of things stood out to me, and I have to imagine that if it wasn't conscious on whoever did the castings part, it was definitely a subconscious influence. Just even from the quality of their voices, right, as actors. Jim Caviezel has a pure voice. It is a clean, pure voice. Um, Guy Pearce, right, is the other guy. He's got that kind of greasy. He's got a greasy and gritty kind of voice. And then right there, it's almost like the dialect betrays the character. And what's interesting about Richard Harris is he has that iconic voice that's kind of a mixture of purity and gravelly, and that's who he is as that role. And even Mercedes, she has that very feminine but sure voice. Like she's breathy a little bit, but I never see her as weak. She's hurt, you know, but she also holds her own later because she ends up marrying um Fernand.
Mhm.
And in the face of his other infidelities, she is hurt. She's just as hurt, but still strong beneath that. And her voice does reflect that too, just the timbre of her voice, you know. So I thought that was, and even Luis Guzman as Jacopo,
Jacopo.
he's the same kind of a thing, right? He's this, they call him a maggot because he was stealing from the thieves, you know, and he was going to be executed. But then when they find this prisoner washed up on
Yeah,
shore,
that's an awesome scene. That's
it's so good. He's running and skipping, and then suddenly you
yeah.
see the backs of all these
Yeah.
pirates.
Yeah, I
And
like that about the you said about the voices because I was just thinking about that. Like that's you could rip the audio from that. That could be the audio book kind of thing because the voice.
Absolutely.
Even I was just thinking about the warden of the jail. He's
yeah,
the guy who plays Sir Guy of
Oh,
Gizmo.
that guy.
He's such a slide. He's got that voice. Like he's such a creep and a bad guy.
I love that line where they're carrying the body out. Come on, I haven't got all day.
Yeah, yeah.
I do. I have all the time in the world.
Oh, Michael Wincott. He always plays bad guys. He's
Yeah.
slimy too.
Yeah.
And then even the owner of the ship, Monsieur Morel, he's
Mhm.
got a very clean, pure voice when you're listening to it too. So it kind of all fits so well. It's almost like a drama rather than a movie. Like it's if you could convert a stage play to film, this would be a perfect example of it. I would wonder if you could convert this script to the stage and have success in that as well. I think you probably could because there's not a whole lot of special effects going on in it. But yeah, Jacopo especially stands out because he makes kind of the journey that you want Fernand to make. He goes from being that despicable person to becoming a voice of reason. And Luis Guzman's voice is kind of that blend then too of the grittiness, where at the end he's the one who's saying like, "You have everything you could possibly ever want. Why would you throw it away on revenge?" You know. So he got the mercy, which is another theme we could talk about here. Edmond, even as this criminal who is totally atheistic at the time, where he's completely fueled by revenge, is faced with this life or death duel, right? So back to the plot for the viewers anyway. He escapes from the Chateau d'If. He encounters these pirates, and they have one of their men they're about to kill. They're going to bury him alive because he was stealing. But now some of the men want mercy for their crewmate, and some of the men don't. So the captain is like, I can't show him mercy, but you are an interesting piece on the chessboard, so to speak, right? Because now we can make you guys fight to the death, and he could earn his freedom, or you can join my crew. But then afterwards, I keep switching in my mind between actors' names and characters' names. I'm trying to be more consistent. So Dantes bests this guy in a knife fight and tells him, "Don't move, don't say anything." And he talks to the captain. He's like, "Look, the men got to see sport, um, and you're going to gain both of us in your crew if you spare his life and whatever." And the captain agrees to that. So even in this completely fueled by revenge, atheistic, don't believe in God anymore, prisoner who has escaped, he shows mercy to somebody who then becomes a voice of morality to him later on when he's still lost, which is really fascinating too.
I like when what's what's the guy's name? Jacopo or whatever. When um because he's talking about he's going to exact this like long form revenge, and he's like, "What do we? I'll go there, I'll kill him, and then I'll come back."
Boom,
and
bang,
we'll
bang, bang. We'll
yeah.
get the money.
Yeah, that's classic Hollywood right there.
His face is like, "What do we don't need all this? Like, we got on, yeah, just
He's like, Zatara, you are wealthier than any man I have ever heard of. Let's just chill.
Yeah.
that's pretty funny.
I just to bring in another when in my mind when I think of this movie, The Count of Monte Cristo, this is like 2002, 3, somewhere
Mhm.
early 2000s. Within half a decade or so, I believe, of this movie, there's another movie that came out, even though they're completely different, having to do with justice and character. 310 to Yuma.
Mm.
I think of that one. I don't know if you've seen that one, but I just wanted to throw it in because it's you have a similar thing about character, revenge, justice, about doing the right thing. They're two movies I think of together. I think because they're like things you could show young people and show them about virtue, about how how do you handle when you're wronged, or you know um conquering those feelings of revenge, or doing the right thing when it's difficult, or things like that. So I just that's another one I think of when I think of the Count of Monte Cristo. um
I'm trying to think now if there was any other ones at that time period too. Um, another movie I just watched recently with my family too was the Ocean's 11 remake with George Clooney and Brad
uh,
Pitt. I think there's some similarities in the cinematography there too, like the montages, the cutting to like all these things orchestrating together, like the big master plan,
yeah,
right? Coming.
that's what I was gonna. Yeah, I was like, I was buffering there for a second because I was thinking that was in that time period. There were a bunch of pretty good movies came out,
Yeah.
and there was like a formula down. Good actors and like good pacing and good stories that came out in that late '90s up until 2010. Um, uh, a lot of really good movies that you and they're rewatchable. Like The Count of Monte Cristo, I've probably seen like 4 or 5 times at least all the way through. Um, and it is a movie as well. Like you can watch it with your family if you want to, and it's
Yeah,
uh,
it's pretty
very good.
tame. There's a
Yeah.
little bit of like premarital relations, but it's only kind of hinted at, you know, which actually does not happen in the book. At
Ah.
least the portion that I've read. And I did read a synopsis of the book, and there's no mention of like an unknown son coming back. So I don't know if that was a Hollywood creation entirely or not. I haven't finished the book yet,
Ah.
but it wasn't at least part of the beginning. And like I said, what I've gone through up to the point where he goes to prison has been pretty accurate. So
Hmm.
I guess Hollywood's got to put it in there, right, to make that compelling love story. Um, but it's a great twist in the movie. Like it's a
Yeah.
brilliant movie when they find that out. But it's not really consistent with Dantes as a character up until that point, considering the time period that it was set. Maybe a little criticism I have of it there.
Mhm.
But I think, like you said, Brad, with the pacing and everything, it's almost like it ties it together, right? Like it keeps it moving and ties it all up again by the end in a very satisfying way.
Well, also speaking about the sun twist thing, I mean, I think it's seen oftentimes the mark of a good movie when Superman's in it.
Yeah, right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, baby Henry Cavill's in it. I thought I was like, oh yeah, it was pretty good. Yeah,
He's
but
in the catacombs being attacked. Do your worst, and they stab him, and the swords break.
mhm. Yeah, it's some fun stuff. It's another good plan though that he manages to work in there for his scheme. So it is fun. I really like the some of it's almost harkens back to like this classic old Hollywood. It's almost it's borderline cheesy, but there's a
Yeah.
wholesomeness to it. Like the whole thing where he gets the magistrate to confess, but obviously don't have a wire. But this it's in the bathhouse, and the steam's just obscuring everything. And then he this slowly turns it off, and then the whole police department's basically there. Like that's like a little cheesy, but it's kind of awesome though. It's like the
Yeah.
mic drop moment, like
Yeah.
boom,
And
you
he's
know.
fully clothed with a cape and everything, and
Uh
the guy can't take the heat, but
Yeah.
Yeah, but he perfectly can because he's that cool,
Wearing
see?
a wire.
Huh?
yeah.
Right, he hooks up. He's like, "Okay, Count, gotta be wearing the wire. You can get him to say the thing. Get him to talk about the note. Burn in the letter. Okay, we need this." Oh
I'm not
man.
gonna tell you about the. He's like, I'm not saying anything in
It's
here.
like, why would never? Why are you trying to
I can
incriminate me?
see all the
No.
I can see clearly see
It's
all
like
the police officers standing.
I could hear Billy and Johnny shuffling with their rifles next door. Like how did they all like how are they all ninjas? See, so like it's like little things.
What was that?
Exactly. Like at their muzzle, like we okay. So it's one of those. But that's the thing, though. And I don't really necessarily think that's the mark. And I guess it's one of those things like watching the movie again. Like it's sort of been like in the back of my mind because Brief Baxter. One reason I wanted to talk about this movie, it's kind of been like a running tradition because my birthday is November the 4th. And so I don't know if you guys have seen V for Vendetta, but they always, talk about remember the 5th of November. And in that movie, they watch the old Count of Monte Cristo. And this is the only one I was familiar with. So I want to talk about this one. But that's the thing, though. I think this one, I don't know if I liked it quite as much as I did when I was growing up watching it. And I was thinking about what you guys said about the fact that it transfers really well to like a stage play or something. I think it does. Like it's very good, efficient, a bit Hollywoodized, but it holds together really well. And I was curious what you said too, like, oh, it could transfer to a stage production. It's of course, movies are pretty expensive, but I was looking quick at the budget for it. As I was watching it, I felt like it wasn't like the most sweeping budget, and it looks like it was 35 million, which isn't really crazy for a movie. So I think they did a really good job without a ridiculous budget, and they found some really good locations. The costumes are really good. And obviously they did, and what Nate you pointed out with the sound design, like it's almost like casting with the voices and the mixing for it's really good. So they did a lot, and the script works really well. So it's very very efficient,
Well,
and
and the
yeah,
cinematography is really brilliant.
hmm
Like, there's so many good camera shots. Like, from inside the body bag, you watch the keys swing up, and then he reaches out and grabs them. And just like you said in the steam room, like, that's beautiful visually, even if
hmm
it's a little, like, unbelievable. But there's some other really just sweeping, beautiful shots, like the balloon you said, Brad, and just it's very
firework.
well done.
hmm Do
And
you
it's consistent. It's consistently well done. It's not like
mm,
there's hit or miss parts of it. So that's a testament to, I don't know, the director, I guess. And
yeah, director Kevin Reynolds,
Kevin
who
Reynolds. I just looked it
oh
up.
he
He also did
Ro-
Prince of Thieves, Robin Hood. Yeah,
Robin Hood, that
yeah.
tracks, yeah. Also did
Waterworld.
Waterworld, which, you know what?
Waterworld.
It
You know
gets a
what? So,
bad rap, gets a bad rap, gets a bad rap. So it's
Are
a
we doing that next?
biggest, trying to film on the ocean. He tried to do it, give him respect for trying, having some big problems. I wanted to ask you guys too, watching this again, it's been really fun to discuss it. And you've actually both given me some newer, finer things to appreciate it too. So I am really glad we're talking about this movie. And I wanted to pose a question to you guys. Uh, do you think this movie is a little under the radar, like a bit underrated, because it's something that I don't really hear people talk about. I was glad other people knew about it and liked it, but would you guys say it's should it be loved more, or is it kind of nicely packed in the era that it was from?
I think that, at least from my experience, I don't really, everyone I know, it's not in like, nobody would put it in their top five movies, which I might do now. Yeah. Um, but everybody who has seen it is like, oh yeah, that's a great movie. Even if they don't have it in their list of iconic films. Which is, there's something to say about that because not every film has to be iconic to be great.
hmm
You know, actually, what's it on Rotten Tomatoes? What do they give it? I don't really put a whole lot of stock in.
yeah, I don't really like that either. I think it was like an
I
86 or
think it's
something,
up there.
70,
Yeah,
something like that. It was pretty good, but
yeah.
yeah,
How
Rotten
did that,
Tomatoes.
what
Yeah.
was the fans compared to the?
Let's check it. I think it was like 70s or 80s. I'll bring it up quick. Yeah, I don't put a lot of stock in that either. But yeah, it was pretty highly rated, but it's not like one of those ones you'd say it's like, oh man, 98% critics loved it or anything. Also, another little thing that might be a factor as well is that checking out when it was released, was released in January, which is kind of like traditionally back in the day for movie theaters. That was like the dumping ground. And I don't know if you guys know this, but I worked in a movie theater for a year or two, and I learned this. January and February is like where they send movie releases that studios do not have faith in. So that means that whoever released this, which I find really hard to believe, because it's such a good movie, I would have never thought it was a January release. For whatever reason, the studio did not have faith in it, and it made a profit. It made like twice its budget back. It did well, so I find that interesting. I'm just finding that out now. Yeah, so
I just
that
pulled it up. They have a 74 on the critics and then an 88 from the fans. I mean, which is a pretty good indicator of a darn good movie, you know.
yeah, most people that see it like it. Yeah, that's I agree with that. Yeah,
But to answer
so
your question, I think that um it probably deserves a little bit more credit than it might get.
mhm. Brad, thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's one of those kind of like Nate said. It's anytime I bring it up, if the people have seen it, they're like, "Oh, that's a good movie. That's an awesome movie." The other one I mentioned, if you guys haven't seen it, it's another one like 310 to Yuma. Um, a couple years earlier, but like the 13th Warrior with Antonio Banderas, another
Oh.
good movie. Those are like high ranking, like second tier movies is the way I think of it. They're not like great films. No one's gonna like. They're not gonna be on like I don't know if it's Criterion. I don't know whatever, but you're not gonna go in the Criterion closet and be like, oh,
Well, you never know, Brad. I mean,
maybe.
Armageddon is on the Criterion
So
collection. So yeah, see, they put anything in there. I don't understand them anymore.
yeah.
So is
But
Chasing.
who decides what's the
Yeah,
Criterion?
exactly. We should
What's the
decide.
criteria for a Criterion?
Yeah. Is there
Whatever
like
you want it to be. However we can make a profit for
is
it.
there a
Basically.
blood sport Criterion? Because I want that.
Kickboxer 5, The Return.
Lionheart.
Mortal Kombat from the 90s. Is that
Yeah.
on Criterion?
Oh,
Man,
I saw that in the theater, by the way, when that came out. That was tough, but
that's a great.
I think
that's
I
a
might
great
have seen it in the theater. I don't remember if I did.
yeah. I was hype
Oh,
about it when it came out because I was like,
oh,
what, 50? I forgot what it was. But yeah,
oh.
I think it's a good movie. It's strong. It is like Joe. I like what you said. Like it harkens back to old Hollywood because it gets borderline cheesy, but it's not because it does it well. It is innate, like you said. It's kind of like you're watching you know, a stage play. Like that's something I could see on the stage. This steam clears and they're there, and he's like, "Oh, I've been, rats. I've been foiled." Um, and Edmond Dantes, I think Jim Caviezel does such a good job. He's so innocent and like at the beginning, like you almost like, yeah, get rid of this guy. He's almost unlike,
Yeah.
you're like, yeah, you're someone's gonna prey on you because you're just you're too good looking and tall to be like flaunting that you're doing the right thing all the time. But I like it. I've seen it probably, like I said, I've seen it like 5 times. I remember I watch, I think about sometimes because my aunt, who's since passed away, she really liked that movie, and I probably saw it with her 2 or 3 times. Which probably those other movies I mentioned, I also watched with her. So that's probably why I have that connection. Which when you have a connection, a personal connection to a movie, that also helps, like a family connection, personal connection. But yeah, I think and the people I know of that know about it really like it. And then I've talked to people, I don't know if everybody knows about it, but it's there. Like you said, Joe, I'm surprised that it was dumped. Like if that's what they're doing with it at that
Mhm,
time.
probably.
Was it 2002? I don't know what it was,
Yeah,
but
those two.
Looks 2002. Yeah,
I wonder
yeah.
if there's any connectivity to like 9/11, if there was a hit in
Yeah. Well,
the movie
people.
industry and like people didn't want to go out to the movies and I don't
This you know what this actually feels like? This feels almost like one that would try to push for Oscars like a November, December release, and yeah, people might have been going less. That I could
Oh
believe
yeah,
that.
maybe they wanted to release it and they just pushed it a little bit because of that. It would
Mhm.
make sense because
That
I
might be
mean I don't know
yeah.
why you would dump with that. That's a good cast. I mean it's obviously a good script. It's based on a good
Yeah,
written work.
like seeing that release date for this type of movie was really unusual. That's why I was like, "What? That doesn't seem to fit."
Yeah, it feels like a summer blockbuster, you know.
Mhm.
It really does feel like that. Um, I wonder, yeah, that is weird. So I wonder if maybe was the content of the movie something Hollywood wasn't pushing at that point. What else was big at that era? Like was Forrest Gump was a little before that, wasn't it?
That was out this after.
Oh, I have a theory. I have a theory.
Uh-oh.
I'm just thinking of this now. Well, let's see. Fellowship of the Ring came out, and maybe somebody didn't want to try to compete with it once they saw
Oh
how good it
yeah.
was doing. That
Sure.
might have been part of
Yeah,
it,
you don't want to
actually.
step to that. Oh yeah,
No,
that would
that
have been
it
about
would
the
have gotten
same.
crushed.
Yeah.
Would have gotten
The battle of
crushed.
the great novels, yeah.
Yeah, Dumas had no chance.
But like there's one of the well done things too is the balance of virtue and vice. Because we've talked a lot about how revenge is that driving factor, but never is virtue neglected in the storytelling. Even as simply as in like the training montage, that priest says thank you every time he gets his meal. Right. So
Oh yeah.
maybe there's something there, and I could see somebody in a back room saying like, it's a little goody goody, let's not push this one. Like, people like to see explosions and more vice and things like that, which is true, like that stuff does sell. But there was never a separation of virtue from the vices. There was always a balance throughout that. So I don't know, it's just a thought I have. There's a lot of talk of God in it too, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
I don't
hard
know,
to-
but I think it's got a good message though, and some
It
I
doesn't
like
beat
that
you over
it's
the head with it. That's why I don't understand. It doesn't make sense. If
yeah,
that were a reason, it doesn't seem to make sense because you're
Yeah,
not really.
no.
it's subtle enough that it's not
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's not
No,
preachy.
it's powerful. I think there's power in the subtlety. It's pretty accessible and it's very digestible. It's not. I won't say it's like certainly the most cerebral movie, but it doesn't really have to be. It's got a good story and good characters. So I don't know. I don't know. That's a mystery. Why this one isn't as well liked is stumping me a lot right now, actually. But
Well, and
I've always really liked it.
you could almost compare it to like a Pirates of the Caribbean or even like an Indiana Jones, like a similar kind of an adventure story, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's very
Yeah.
much that too, but those stories do lack a lot of that subtlety.
Mm,
Maybe that's
mhm,
that. Maybe it boils down to that. Like it's
mm,
even though it's not cerebral, like you're saying, it is a thinker.
mhm,
It does stir something in you
mm.
that maybe people aren't looking for in a summer blockbuster. Maybe at least
Well,
I could see that from a marketing
You know
perspective.
what? There's probably some grain of truth to what you're saying. The sad thing is, I feel like the movie wouldn't have a chance now. 20 years ago,
Well, they
it's
did a
like,
remake. I haven't seen it yet, but
oh,
one
Yeah,
just came out
there
last
was
year.
a new one came out.
okay. Oh yeah, I heard about that. Yeah. You're right. You're right.
I don't even know where to watch that. I don't know if it's
Part did.
Parts
Did.
the count just decides to take everybody else out.
Checkmate.
the Count of Monte
The
Cristo.
King of Monte Cristo. He just
You're not
ascends to the throne of Paris. It's
you're
like
locked in here with me. And
he just turns the Chateau d'If into like his own personal fortress. I like how he
killing
went back
ground.
there.
It's like
They reboot it. They reboot it today, and he's a bum who's lost it all, and now it's just the warden at the Chateau d'If. That's
Oh, that's the
hey, just
postmodern kind of
speaking
weak
of
thing.
movies, I know do you know, I just thought of this. I don't know if you relate to anybody or do you know anybody that really has horrible taste in movies? And if they say like, "Oh, that movie's awesome," like I know then that I don't want to see it. Like it's a piece of crap. Yeah, like
I,
that's the kind of oh man, it was awesome. Like the Monte Cristo too. Like they,
Brad, I thought you were gonna go one worse. Like, man, they tell me like this movie is great, and I just know I don't want to associate with you as a
no,
person.
I don't. I'm related to some people that I'm like, if they like that movie,
Oh man.
that is a
yeah, they tell you, hey,
steamy
check
that's
out
a
a show or
steamy
something. I'm
turd
like, not
awaiting.
gonna
Like,
do that. Oh, you gotta watch this new show. Nope. No, I'm not.
no, I'm not
Tell me
interested.
everything. Just spoil it for me. That's
Yeah.
fine. But I'm not
Why
gonna
don't I
watch
just lobotomize myself? I don't want to watch your stupid show.
Oh, Brad, before we wrap up, because I sense we're getting there, I wanted to ask, who do you think, the serious question, who do you think was a better Napoleon? Okay.
Oh
The
man.
Napoleon and the Count of Monte Cristo are your buddy Joaquin. Okay. In that Napoleon movie. I know it's different takes, but I want your legitimate answer because I know you're a Joaquin fan. Which Napoleon did you like better? Can you imagine him in this? If he was in this, how would it have affected the movie? What do you think?
Oh, Joaquin Phoenix says this.
Here, take the would you take this lesson to
Yeah.
Monsieur Clarion?
Why?
Mother be
Yeah.
upset with you,
Yeah.
please.
the
Be
real
very
intense
different.
close up of his face.
Very just hard close up
Hey,
on his lips
the
as he
guy,
speaks.
whoever the Napoleon guy was a good Napoleon.
He was
He
a
looked like
solid
Napoleon.
Napoleon.
Yeah.
I don't
Solid
know if he
Napoleon.
was anybody famous, but in my
He
brain,
looks like Napoleon.
a Napoleon type.
In my brain, it's John Lovitz, even though I know it's not.
Oh yeah, that's what I
Oh.
thought. Yeah, it is.
I just think it's John Lovitz, which
What
would
do you-
probably be
what
awesome.
do
Now that would have been great.
you-
Oh man.
You see the back of Napoleon, and then he turns around and it's John Lovitz.
Hey, what are you doing on my island? It's just like, it's just that would actually would have been pretty brilliant. Oh man, the
That's
critic.
keeper.
Oh,
That's it.
That was
then.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a good Napoleon, I think. I did not see Joaquin's Napoleon, but
that's okay.
It was a hot
he's,
mess.
he's a great actor, man. But
Yeah.
sometimes I just like I'm not interested in what movies he's making.
I think Brad will agree with me. Great battle scenes, but I don't know. You want to talk about a pacing issue? The opposite of this one. Like,
Yeah.
I was like, what? This is some of the scenes.
The
Oh wow.
bizarro world form of yeah.
It was an experience, though. I'll say that much. It was an experience.
So his name is Alex Norton, who played Napoleon. He's in Braveheart. He's the bride's father in Braveheart.
Oh,
Which
Huh.
I actually, I'll be honest, I've never seen Braveheart. So
well, Brad hates it.
What?
I remember you were like, oh, like if you want, we should talk about it. Like, that Braveheart movie.
I said no.
Kinda-
I
you
said
said it was kind of overrated. If you
I
ask-
said
remember.
I used the words overrated.
You said a piece of garbage.
I have my if you ever want to talk, I can explain myself because
No, it's fine.
I had people
I just-
threaten me because
I'll watch
No.
it, Brad, and I would love to hear what you think.
William Wallace. No, I like Braveheart. I would
I
be
like
very interested. No, I would be interested to hear.
I
your-
like
your
Braveheart. I just don't I just don't like Braveheart like some people do.
There's
you don't
just
think
too many men's butts in it, right?
I mean the butt I don't know. The butt it's enough butts. But it's some other
It's just
thing.
the right amount.
Yeah. Like the perfect amount of bare Scottish butts. It's enough.
Aren't they
Oh,
painted blue anyway?
they
It's
weren't going the extra
arse.
mile on that one.
Oh my gosh.
All right. Well, the podcast has begun to disintegrate, so I think we'll wrap it up there. First of all, I just want to say, Nate, thank you for coming on. This was really great talking about the Monte Cristo. We hope to have you on again sometime.
Absolutely. Let me know when, and I'll be there.
Yeah, thanks,
Alrighty.
Nate. And your office looks awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah.
It looks borderline regal in the back, like you're official.
Got my Rembrandt over here. I just need something to fill this space over here now.
The lighting is almost reminiscent of the cinematography of Monte Cristo. It's just I'm getting vibes.
Maybe I need a name for the office. Maybe I'll just call it Monte Cristo.
Oh, I like it.
Chateau something.
Chateau Cristo.
Studio Monte Cristo or something like that. Cool. All right, Brad, say goodbye.
Goodbye, Brad.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.
All right. Good night.